When you start looking at hormones, they can expose the crack in your relationships. So if there's underlying issues and you're having hormonal changes, it brings things to the surface that you just can't sweep to the side anymore. It brings a level of non-tolerance towards certain behaviors, or you're thinking, I'm not going to continue to function this way. Some people refer to it as the estrogen veil lifting. A lot of people refer to the estrogen as our people pleasing. And so as we go through perimenopause and our hormones are declining, especially estrogen, and we don't have our progesterone as much to buffer some of that estrogen, we can have these symptoms of being more irritated or frustrated or just not having it anymore.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. All right, so I've had, a few hormone specialists come on now, and we've talked about, this transition's a little wonky for us. It's not so fun sometimes, but also there's some great, really liberating parts of it, but we haven't talked directly about how it impacts marriage. And I recently came across an account that I just fell in love with on Instagram. And Brooke Davis, this is what she specializes in. Literally marriage and menopause and the transition of our hormones changing and how it affects midlife marriages, which is most of us, okay? And I had to have her on the show, obviously, because I'm about to go through this. Some of you are in the thick of it or have already been through this. And so whatever stage you're in, I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it, whether it's validation that you have not gone crazy or just information to help prepare you as you enter this next phase of your life. So Brooke, thank you so much for being part of the show. I have loved getting to know you, and I'm sure the listeners will love you too. Can you please share with us where you live, how old your kids are, and how did you get into specializing in this?
It was definitely an evolution. So, yes. Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me. I'm excited to be here today with you and to share how I got here and the things that I've learned along the way. So this is really a lived experience for me. I am not trained specifically in hormones. I'm not trained specifically in marriage. So what happened and what got me here was that in my late 30s, I started experiencing some changes, right? I started having some symptoms that now I know are related to hormone changes, but at the time I didn't. And so when I went to my GYN, asked her, what was going on? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I irritable? Why do I have less energy? What's going on? I was just basically told that you're just aging and this is normal and you're under a lot of stress. So you should probably figure out how to get less stress in your life. And you should probably eat less and exercise more so you don't keep gaining weight. And it's just part of the evolution. And I thought, oh my gosh, this sounds terrible. I can't deal with this. And so that was, about 12 years ago. And so what that did is it was a catalyst for me. Essentially, I started doing a lot of research on hormones and what they did and how they affect your body. And I started listening and, to different physicians, different researchers, doing all the work. And I started connecting hormonal dots to things that were going on in my life personally. And I was noticing that the symptoms that I was having was affecting my relationship with my husband. And, it was really changing the dynamic. And that started to worry me a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, why all of a sudden do I have this disdain towards my husband? And why does everything he say makes me frustrated and angry? And so I was like, okay, there's got to be a correlation. So that led me down a lot of research in psychology and relationships and all these things. And so what it kind of led to was that essentially when someone, a partner in a relationship, is going through something, a major change in their life, these are the patterns that it can impact. And so I started connecting all my symptoms with these patterns. And I was like, holy cow, why is no one talking about this? Why are we not sharing this with people? And there's a couple of reasons for that. But what I want to do is I'll get through my story real quick. So as I was doing this research, talking to my friends, my girlfriends, talking to colleagues and even family members, I was developing a pattern. And that pattern was, as we were all about in the same time of life, we were all around the same age, 5 to 6 years. And we were having, these issues with our relationship. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's here. It's right here in everything that I've read and researched. And here it is. It's playing out in real life. And so that is when it kind of came upon me that I needed to do something with this information that I found. And that's how I started my Instagram account, Marriage and Perimenopause. And so this is a very much lived experience. It's very research backed. I've been able to really take this information and talk to experts in different fields and the medical sciences and psychology and all these things. And I'm like, okay, we know that this happens. Why are we aren't sharing it? So that's how it became to me. It was very much a lived experience that I thought, wow, other couples need to know this. And it was very much validated, Michelle, by the outpouring of people that are reaching out to me, like yourself, and like a lot of the people that are following the account, like, hey, wow, we didn't know this. And now we do know at least some of this. How can we make sure that our marriages stay strong through this change of life that's natural,
Yeah, I mean, we're all aware that when you have kids, that's a really stressful time in your
Yeah.
marriage. Okay, like that's like sink or swim, okay? And most people don't have the tools to have a healthy, successful marriage, right?
Yeah.
Like my parents didn't show me that stuff. Like they didn't know how to have healthy communication, how to deal with conflict, partnership was non existent, barely saw any intimacy with them, like holding hands, kissing, nothing. And so I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of people are like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward time, you're like, okay, when the kids get older, this is like often the reason why couples kind of disconnect is when the kids are older,
Yeah.
then we'll get back to us, right? Which, by
Yeah.
the way, is horrible, horrible tactic to have for your marriage, okay? But that aside, you're expecting when the kids get older, which is theoretically when you are going to go through perimenopause and menopause, that you're going to have this like surge of energy and time to connect with each other all the time, to go hang out more because the kids are more independent. They don't need your, 24/7 attention. They can manage. But our hormones change
Yeah.
and it has become a huge, I don't know, like challenging stage where we start to view our partners differently. And I
Yeah.
saw a fun little fact here. In 1990, 8.7% of all divorces in the US were of people that were 50, like 50 and over,
Mm-hmm.
right? So 50 is like menopausal age, right?
Yep.
By 2019, that percentage had grown to 36%,
Yes.
right? So that's fascinating. And it's not that it grew because our hormones changed, it's that I think that generation just didn't view divorce as an okay thing to do. Whereas now it's like, okay, this is not cutting it, we're not compatible. And it's very fascinating to me that that 50-year cutoff, that's where
Yeah.
you're seeing like a huge increase
Mm-hmm.
in that crowd making up a big portion of divorces. So can you
Yeah.
share with me from what you've done research on, what you've experienced, what you've observed from people, why hormones are such a big factor in midlife marriages?
Yeah, I think what we get confused with when it comes to hormonal changes is a lot of time when we're experiencing these symptoms in our body, and they come outward, right? A lot of people think, this is just happening contained in my body, but that is not how it works in a relationship. It spills over into your intimate environment, with your partner. And so a lot of people really confuse some of the symptoms with relationship problems. And so that's where the wires get crossed just a little bit there. So irritation, exhaustion, levels of stress, all these types of things are compounding midlife, right? Because, like you said, some of us that are in midlife are still raising younger children. Some of us in midlife might actually have kids that are leaving the nest, like you said. And there's some of my generation that are still in perimenopause but have grandbabies. And so there's just this huge span of people. And when you start looking at hormones, what I kind of like to say that they do is they sometimes can expose the crack in your relationships, like you had kind of indicated earlier. So if there's underlying issues and you're having hormonal changes, it kind of brings things to the surface that you just can't sweep to the side anymore. It brings a level of maybe non-tolerance towards certain behaviors or certain, things that you've done all your life that you're thinking, I'm not going to continue to function this way. Some people refer to it as the estrogen veil lifting. A lot of people refer to the estrogen as our people pleasing, and so as we go through perimenopause and our hormones are declining, especially estrogen, and we don't have our progesterone as much to buffer some of that estrogen, we can have these, symptoms of being more irritated or frustrated or, just not having it anymore. I hear a lot of women say they give a lot of less F's in their life as they as they age. And so going back to what you were talking about, in that area of divorce, I went ahead and pulled up some of the data here so that I would kind of have it available for you. Essentially, there are studies that show about 60% of divorces involve couples between the ages of 40 and 59, and they're calling this a gray divorce in reference to people that are over, 50, and that women are initiating these divorces around 70% overall, and up to 90% of among college educated women. And when you put those numbers alongside of perimenopause and menopause, you start to see a clear picture that midlife isn't just a season of change, it's a pressure test for your marriage. And so I think, midlife is very multi layered. We just kind of talked about, some of the parental kind of things that we have, but also we're in sometimes a sandwich generation. When we have, maybe we're still taking care of kids, but we're also starting to take care of aging parents, and that also puts a big stressor on the relationship, because I know what you were going to say is that essentially we become household managers and we really lose that connection of being partners or being in more of an intimate relationship. And when you mentioned that we'll just wait until the kids are gone, well, guess what? Something takes place of when the kids are gone. It's not always just, the ability that you will have more and more time to spend together. Things creep in, that really kind of gets in that place. So if you're not tending to the relationship all through this time, you're not going to just think it's going to all just come piece back together when the kids are out of your house or when you feel like it's more stable or what have you. So that's just a little bit of that background that I'm seeing, and I am seeing that a lot of women are kind of getting to this point in life where they're reevaluating what's important to them, what fills their cup, what doesn't fill their cup anymore, and what they want out of life. And sometimes to a spouse, that's scary. When a woman starts reevaluating her life, they start kind of having this feeling of, does that include me? And also,
Might.
they have the feeling of, can I keep up and grow with you? And so some partners maybe aren't willing to grow with a woman when she's in midlife. Some partners might be. They might find that very exciting because it might have been the catalyst that they needed to make some changes in their life and pursue some of their goals and dreams. So that's, another piece of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise that that percentage has grown because not only has divorce been more, I shouldn't say commonplace, but acceptable, understandable, but we as women have also allowed ourselves to have higher standards for what to look for in a partner, right?
Very
Back
true.
then in the past generations, it was very much let's get married to help me survive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to financially provide, I will take care of the home, and that's that. Whether we like each other or not, like a lot, nah, like as long as you're a decent human being, that's fine with me. You do what you do, I'll do what I do. But now we're coming into relationships looking for connection, which
Yep.
is a lot more layered and complicated, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, are you bringing home money? It's like, well, I'm bringing home money too. So what else you got? Can you also participate at home so that we are staying with the times? Because if I'm also working, I'm not considered a homemaker now. We both have to participate in help run this household. And then, not to mention the discovery or the labeling of the mental load, which was not known back then. Are
Yes.
you also going to shop for the clothes, shop for the groceries, figure out what we're eating for dinner, all of that planning that we keep in our heads as women because we've been told that this is our job? Maybe not explicitly, but we've kind of
Yep.
just taking that on. And when we get to midlife, it's like, yeah, our tolerance for what has been simmering beneath the surface, it starts to lower, and we start to become really aware of like, I don't have to put up with this shit anymore. Like, what
Yeah.
is this? Like, I know that there are men out there that are pulling their weight. They
Mm-hmm.
are being equal partners, whatever that looks like, right? It doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, but they're pulling their weight and
Yeah.
showing up for the marriage and for the household. So when you have a partner who's not willing to do that, despite you communicating that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. You're like, well, I'm not going to live out the rest of my years, which I don't even know how many I have left,
Yeah.
dealing with this.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that is what a lot of it comes down to. Some women, when they feel like, I'll go back to that estrogen veil example. Sometimes when they feel like that veil lifts, they feel relieved, right? Because they're like, okay, now I can do what's best for me because I've carried everyone in the family. I've taken care of, the house. I've taken care of the job, what have you. Now I can focus on me. Some women actually open their eyes and they're saddened that they didn't realize the load that they've carried all these years. And then some women have grief over it. So it's really, a mixed response in it, but it does evoke emotion, deep, deep emotion. And sometimes that's challenging for a spouse. And especially if you haven't had a very open relationship that was emotionally deep, like you just explained about your parents, when a woman feels something like that and that hasn't been the norm of the relationship, of course, that's very overwhelming and very shocking, to the other partner in the relationship. So I think sometimes a lot of that's mismatched, and that's kind of what kind of brings that too. But I'm glad you're saying that we're seeing that women are selecting partners for partnership, not survival, not just for reproduction, what it might be, is that we're actually looking for a true partnership. And I'm finding that as I do more research and also having children that are and I did not answer your question. I have two kids and they are 18 and 21. So they are in the Gen Z generation. And there's a lot of promising information coming out of that group for what they want out of partnership, what they want out of a marriage, and maybe not even be married. So I'm finding that, there's a lot that want a partnership, but they don't want to go through the formalization of being married. And that's totally fine too, the way that I look at it. And, so even my 21-year-old, it's a lot different than when I think back to being 21 years old. He understands his girlfriend's menstrual cycle. I never even knew what the menstrual cycle really was until I was in my late 20s trying to conceive and figure out how to get pregnant and have babies, you know? And he understands, like, oh, during this time, mom, she needs more rest. And during this time, she has a lot more energy. And during this time, we cook this type of food. I'm like, son, I never knew any of that. And it's amazing. And so that is the level of partnership they have. So to me, that's exciting. And I think that's something that that generation is really going to push forward for the type of partners and the type of relationship that women are seeking in the future. So that to me is hats off. Love that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I, like you, didn't really learn much about my cycle until I wanted to conceive. Like, obviously, I knew I was going to bleed, right?
Right.
But that was the extent of it. I didn't know that my energy levels would change and fluctuate throughout the month, and that I'm a different version of myself every single day, right?
Yeah.
Like, because for us, it was like all we have to do is track our cervical fluid for the purpose of conceiving, but there's
Yeah.
so much more to it, right? And I'll plug this. They're called the Period Agenda or something like that. I'll put the links in the show notes. But they came out with a mirror sticker with
Love
the 4 cycles, and there's an arrow that you can, just place or whatever phase you're in. And I have it on my mirror. My whole family now can see where I'm at.
I love
And the kids think it's so interesting. Like, how much energy does mommy have today? That is so good for you to know, because that will tell you how much crap I am willing to tolerate and how much I'm not willing to tolerate. So, like, let's just be aware of everybody. And I think it's wonderful that your son is aware of that, because so much of being a female in society is thinking about other people and where
Mm-hmm.
they're at and just being attuned to their emotional and physical and whatever needs, that it's about damn time that the guys are like, oh, okay, well, where are you at? What are
Yeah.
you needing? Even down to the food, because, yeah, we need different kinds of vitamins
Mm-hmm.
and minerals depending on where we're at in our cycle. And I just love that so much for this future generation, that not only is their partner more aware of them, but they're also more aware of them. Because I'm
Yeah.
noticing that self-care is a bigger thing for them
Mm-hmm.
than it was for us, because like self-care wasn't even a term back
No.
then. Like, what? You don't get to do that. Like, what are you achieving over here? What are you taking care of? Um, so anyway, I mean, I can go on forever about that, but I'm very hopeful
Yes.
about the future generations and
Mm-hmm.
what, emotional labor they're putting into their
Mm-hmm.
partnerships going forward.
Yeah.
But let's talk about our generation, because that's
Yep.
where we're struggling, right? This is
We
where we're
are.
struggling, because we weren't taught this. And like you said, we're the sandwich generation, where it's like the people coming after us are more aware, the
Yep.
people before us, zero clue.
Nothing.
And we're
Yeah.
trying to figure it out, right?
Yep.
So, what are some of the most common ways hormone shifts show up in relationships, other than being cranky and irritable? Because that's
Yeah.
like obvious, right? Everyone knows that comes.
Yeah. Everybody kind of knows that because there's a little bit of stigma around it, right? They call it,
Mm-hmm.
oh, she's PMSing, right?
Yes.
So that is a stigma. And I think that is something that our generation has had a hard time to overcome, because we were told, just be cool, just be chill, just take care of everybody. It's all good. You can work, 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 and all this stuff. And when our hormones shifted and we started having, symptoms or not feeling as well, and everybody looks at us and goes, what's your problem?
Mm-hmm.
So we put it back on ourselves thinking, oh, now we have a problem. It's our fault. And I think what I really want to point out before I answer your question is there is so much research, and it's sobering, that more than half of women felt blindsided by perimenopause. So we
Mm-hmm.
have half of the population of women coming into a huge biological shift that they are unprepared for. Okay, so that is our first big heart stop. And we're hearing more people talk about it. And I'm in it so deep, and I talk to a lot of people about it all the time. Sometimes it's hard for me to comprehend and understand that not everybody knows that it's happening. And so I think sometimes we just have to take a step back and remember that not everyone understands what these shifts are and how they impact them and what happens. And when couples don't have the language, when a woman don't have a language for what's happening to her, right, it becomes misinterpreted and it becomes a relationship problem. And when that's not there and when that's not available for people, then people automatically think something's wrong with them or their relationship. So let's talk about some things, some of the symptoms that disrupt our daily life, because these are some of the things you already said: irritability, cranky, and all those things. But the crushing fatigue. A
Mm.
lot of people don't think that that is a symptom of hormonal changes, but it most definitely is. And especially when you've been somebody that's been going at it and doing really well, and all of a sudden you hit this wall and you are exhausted all the time. You go to work, you come home, you can barely make it to the couch. You get up in the morning and you're still exhausted because you couldn't sleep all night. And that really impacts relationship, because your spouse is like, what is wrong? Like, why are you so tired all the time? And you don't know, you can't explain it. Like, I just can't sleep. I'm exhausted by the time I get home from work. That means things like I don't really have time to take care of the kids because I'm exhausted. I don't have time to cook because I'm exhausted. That changes the relationship dynamics, the household dynamics, really. And then, of course, when we are in these hormonal flux, we have these unpredictable menstrual cycles, right? Like, one time we might have something we bleed for a very long time, or we have those, what some people call crime scene bleeds, where we bleed so much and we're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have to go to the hospital. So what is wrong with us? And then the level of anxiety. I think a lot of people don't realize that when hormones shift, and especially when our progesterone starts decreasing, that's our natural anti-anxiety agent. And so when we don't have that available to us, anxiety ratchets up. And this is where you hear women say things like, I get so anxious I can't drive my car anymore. Or I get so anxious, I can't take a meeting now because I'm just so anxious about it. And that is confusing to our spouse too. They're like, why are you so anxious all the time? What do you mean you don't want to get in the car and drive to the restaurant tonight? Why are you anxious about that? We love this restaurant. you know? And so then you're defending yourself. Well, I don't know why I feel like this. I'm not really sure, but I just feel anxious about it. And then the brain fog. And this layers into the relationship. When the brain fog settles in, you forget things, you misplace things, you walk into a room and can't remember, well, why did I walk into this room? You put your car keys in the refrigerator and then you can't find them. And then your spouse is like, what's happening? Like, why are you having these issues? Is something wrong? Are you sick or whatever? And then the mood changes. So that's not just being cranky. We can have mood changes within a 24-hour period when these hormones are fluctuating. We could wake up and we could be fine. In the next hour, we could feel anxious. And then in the next little bit, we could feel frustrated or irritated by something. And then in the next couple of hours, we're feeling okay again. And so all of these changes, like, they're just, constantly on a roller coaster and changing every day. Our spouse sees us as unpredictable, and that worries them. And they're like, I don't know how to reach out to you because no matter what I say is not the right thing, or it's not good enough for the situation. And also, I don't know why I'm triggering you. Like, they don't understand that, one little word, something like, hey, did you pay that bill? All of a sudden feels like criticism. What do you mean, did I pay that bill? Yes, I paid the bill. Like, we get like that. And that is, like, I think, very overwhelming to the relationship. So when I go back to saying that women don't know they're in perimenopause, that's why the relationship feels it. And it's not to say that, like, we would figure that out right away. It's just like, when we understand that our hormones are shifting, we can kind of be like, oh, okay, this is why I feel like this. And we can validate our own selves. We don't always need our husband to validate us, but when they do, it's amazing. Yes, we want them to validate us. But when you can validate yourself and give yourself self compassion and say, I'm going through a major change in my life. And I don't want to react like this, and I don't want to feel like this, but this is part of this. And what are the ways that I can do to feel better, myself? And I think that's why a lot of women in our generation have just been told just to hush and just to deal with it. And it's not a big deal. And why are you overreacting? And so we've just got this frustration and rage built up in us. And when this hits us, sometimes we can't control it.
Yeah, I mean, we have been criticized for those moments when we're more human, right? Like when our
Hmm.
emotions get the better of us or
Hmm.
hormones get the better of us. And it is so helpful to know how it's affecting us so that we can have those really clear conversations with them. Like, look, this is a phase that I'm going to be entering, or this is the phase that I'm currently in. And that's why I'm
Yep.
doing these things. I don't want to be doing those things. Like, trust me, I don't want to
Yep.
lose my shit every day.
Yes.
And yeah, I know that it's different than how I was before, but this is where I'm at. And I'm looking into what I can do to support myself. That's going to
Mhm.
be way better than past generations where it's like, what happened to my wife?
Yeah.
You are crazy. I don't even want to go down this road. But, men have historically just assumed that we should be like them, right?
Mm.
And clearly we are very different.
Very
They
different.
are like the same person day in, day out, unless they have something stressful going on. We are so much more complicated than them.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can understand ourselves and the more we can help our partners to understand us, there can be a level of grace that can be given
Yeah.
that wasn't there before.
Absolutely. And that's where awareness and education come in. That's the second step. So not only do women need to know what's going on with, so do the men. They need to understand that their wife is beautiful, that their wife is going through an awesome phase of her life. Yes, it's turbulent. It is very turbulent. I don't want to make it sound like it's not, but it's profound. I mean, we have gotten to the point where we can live longer. We're going to live probably 30 plus years in post menopause. I mean, realistically, when you look back just 100 years ago, we definitely weren't living beyond menopause very much. You know, a lot of women might have lived maybe 10 years after menopause. But now we have to think about longevity. And that is also where, when our men support us, when our men validate us too from a partner and support us, not only are they supporting what the change is going on, but they're supporting our health, our mental health. They're supporting, our other bodily health. We got to take care of that heart. We got to take care of our bones. We got to take care of our brain, during this time. And if they want to have still a vibrant wife when we get into our 70s and everything, we got to put the work in now, people. Like, we have got to make sure that we take care of ourselves. When I say we, I'm talking about husbands and wives, taking care of ourselves. Because I bet you $100 that if any of our husbands got sick, we would know everything about the disease. We would know how it's treated. We would understand what needed to happen on the next phase of it. We would change their diet. We would help them exercise. We would do all the things to help them get healthy. And they need to reciprocate that for us. And sometimes that's very hard for men to do. They're so used to us being in that caregiving role. They're so used to, thinking, well, my mother took care of my father and she didn't complain about nothing, and I'm thinking, well, okay, we probably didn't know what went behind closed doors. But anyway, it's a different world now. And if we're looking at women and we want women to live longer and we want them to have this beautiful life, because we know that second act is beautiful. And if you look at women that are changing the world now, it's women over 50. It's not these 20-year-olds anymore. It's women over 50 that are making these huge, profound research findings. They're opening up businesses and organizations that are taking care of people. And so you look at it and you're like, we want these women to get what they deserve, and that's health and longevity and wellness. So I talk about the relationship, but if you are at your best health and you have the tools and the resources you need to do that, your relationship can thrive, during that time. But if your husband's not validating you, if he's saying things like you're making excuses and my mom didn't complain and all of this, your relationship can't grow in that area. So if men aren't willing to learn and to put that type of effort into the relationship, then you're right, it's not going to last. And we need to think about that as women too. So if we find that, is that good enough for us or is it not? Is the question.
Yeah, that's a really important question. I mean, I think it's important to stay intentional about whether things are enough for you or not. And I love what you said earlier on. You said that hormones can expose cracks in a marriage, right?
Mhm.
We're not here saying, okay, when you hit perimenopause, when you're approaching menopause, your relationship is only in trouble because you're experiencing these hormone changes.
No.
So let's help the listeners figure out, okay, is it my hormones, or are there deeper issues here that could
Mhm.
use some attention and
Yeah.
some better tools to navigate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of times, what we're talking about is unresolved issues in your relationship. And that could be a multitude of things, but also even uneven division of responsibilities in your relationship. And that goes back to the mental load, the emotional load, communication gaps that you've always had. Maybe you've never been able to resolve conflict. Maybe you both always went to bed upset or frustrated or angry. You didn't have the tools or resources to resolve your conflicts in a healthy manner. That will be very heightened. Maybe unmet needs. Maybe there's things that you haven't told your spouse that you've needed. Maybe you've kept that to yourself and you were hoping that your spouse would know what you needed. That's a big one that I hear people say is, I shouldn't have to tell my spouse what I need. Well, you do have to tell your spouse sometimes what you need because we're not mind readers. That's what I like to tell people a lot of times is that if you do have a need that's going unmet and you haven't expressed it, you're just going to build resentment. You're going to have resentment towards your spouse or your relationship. So until you become brave enough or until you find the words that you need to use, you have to speak your needs. And then, we talk about like annoyances, things that, used to not annoy you as much might annoy you more now. A lot of people think about the little things like stuff like, they're chewing, the way that they breathe, whatever. Yeah, those are minor annoyances. And yeah, they get on your nerves only because hormones do cause sensitivities to you, like light and sound and stuff like that. But that's not going to be your relationship crack. It's going to come back to when you started the relationship. Did you have any agreements on how your relationship would work? Probably not, right? We assumed roles at that point in time of what the female did and what the male did, and they've evolved over time. And you might have developed some levels of resentment over time for what those were. And if you had not addressed them over time, they're going to hit you like a ton of bricks in midlife. And it's harder to overcome at that point in time because you've developed deep seated patterns in your relationship. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And folks like yourself that are coaches and therapists and all those things to really work through those. But if you have talked about those things and you've adjusted things over your marriage and your lifespan, then they're not as hard to deal with because it becomes things like, oh, hey, you know what? This isn't working now. And I need us to talk about how we can make it fair for both of us. That's not going to be a hard conversation. If it's deep seated, that is going to be like hitting a brick wall in that part. So I think a lot of things that come up are you're probably have never had really good communication skills of resolving conflict. That's always a big one. That's what I hear a lot. And it's always like he doesn't understand me or she has no clue what I'm going through. And that's what it all that comes down to that. And then, just really kind of thinking about those unmet needs. I've really talked to so many people that just felt like their spouse should just know what they needed. And they held deep, deep resentment for that. And they feel like if they love me enough, they would know. And I was like, well, if they could buy mind reading skills, they would. you know?
100%. I've heard that so many times, and I get it because us women have just been trained from an early age to anticipate other people's needs and pay deep, deep attention to specifics, right? Like how did they react? And
Yeah.
just like a heightened awareness that we really shouldn't have had put on us, but we have.
Yes.
And we have to remember guys were not brought up like that, or at least
Oh,
most guys, right? They've been brought up to just handle their business.
right.
There's like no community aspects to that. It's just you, yourself, and I. Whereas we're like, okay, let's pay attention to other people, but not ourselves. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that is a huge one that a lot of women share with me. They feel that resentment of like, why do I have to think of what I need and then communicate that. Well, your
Yeah.
relationship is a team effort.
It
And
is.
when you
Yeah.
think of any sports team, communication is huge, right? Like it's so big. You
Yeah.
have to let the person know what your intentions are, what you're needing to do, what the next
Mhm.
moves are. You have to have a shared goal.
Yeah.
Same for your marriage. So,
Yeah.
like, if you are wanting to go on a date, you better tell him that you miss going on dates. Like,
Yeah.
don't wait for him because then you're just setting yourself up for disappointment,
Yes.
which will then spiral into more resentment. And then he's going to get it and he's going to wonder, what the hell did I do?
Yep.
Right? So, don't
Hmm.
put yourself in that position. Um,
Yeah.
but with that said, you've made it so clear that hormones can really affect marriages. And
Yeah.
now we know the difference. Like, okay, does our marriage need help? Or do I personally need help because my hormones are shifting so much
Yeah.
that I'm struggling to just do life right now,
Yeah.
honestly? I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. The fatigue, the brain fog, I am there with you guys, okay?
Hmm.
What's the next step if that's the case? If
Yeah.
it's just the hormones, what can
Yeah.
someone do? Because I know I've gone to the doctor and I said, look, these are the symptoms I'm going through. I don't know if I'm perimenopausal yet or if I'm pre-perimenopausal, but I definitely noticed shift
Hmm.
from starting 37 years old on. I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I gained 15 pounds in one single year. I didn't do anything different. And
Yeah.
now I'm tired all the time. I'll be recording a podcast and I will lose track of what I was even saying. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what did I just say? And the doctor literally told me, no, you're not. You're not. But like, okay, well, what do I do about what I'm experiencing? Right? I think I
Yeah.
took one blood test and I learned from a different menopause expert that one blood test alone is not enough because your hormones fluctuate throughout the day. So depending on the time and what I ate,
Yeah.
it could have shown that my levels were normal.
Right. Yeah.
So, how can we advocate for ourselves and what are the next steps that we can do to support
Yeah.
ourselves and not keep hearing, like, oh, this is just what you have to deal with, or no, I think it's in your head?
Yep, absolutely. And that's the most frustrating part, right? Especially here in the US, a good amount of, primary care physicians, which are family medicine trained, internal medicine trained, physicians that typically that's your first stop, right? Like that's the person you call when you're like, I'm running a fever and I've got a sore throat and, all these things are going on. That's your primary care. Well, they don't have specific training in hormones. They are generalists, and they're generalists for a reason, is what I tell people, is because, they're helping us treat, kind of an overall thing. They're not specialists. And it's not that we should have to go to a specialist, but that's the way the US and Western medicine is really kind of set up, is they isolate parts of the body. But here's what we do know. Menopause and perimenopause are not isolated to one part of the body. We have hormone receptors all over our body. Everywhere in our body, we have hormone receptors, and it starts in our brain. Our brain tells the rest of the body what you should be doing and when you should be doing it and how much of it you should be doing. That is our brain center. And the primary care specialist, and here's what I've learned, because I'm a very good friend with my primary care specialist. That is my doctor. And when I went to her and started having some of these additional symptoms when I got into my later 40s, because when I turned 47 is when I thought that I was losing my shit, essentially. That is when perimenopause kicked in 1,000%. Like I had been managing it from my late 30s, for about 10 years. I've been managing it, but 47, I don't know. It ripped the door wide open, and I felt like I could not control myself. I couldn't control my emotions. I couldn't control the way I spoke to people. I couldn't control my face. I couldn't control, any kind of reaction. Somebody would say something to me and my face would say it, my mouth would say it. And then I would feel so much regret because of the things that I would say or the things I would do. And I was like, who is this person? And I went to my primary care and I told her, I said, Karen, I am losing it. And I was like, this is not normal. And she's like, no, that's not normal for you, because she knows me. And she's like, okay. She's like, I'm going to rule out all the things that I can rule out as a journalist. Okay. She's like, I'm going to do your lab work. I'm going to do an EKG on. I was having heart palpitations too. She's like, I'm going to do an EKG on you. She's like, I'm going to finagle some things and make sure you get a stress test too. Like, let's just make sure like some things aren't really going. So of course, all my labs came back normal. Stress test came back normal. EKG was normal. Everything that she ran was normal. And she set me down and she looked at me. She said, I believe you. All the symptoms you're having, I believe it. She's like, I'm not trained to treat hormones. And I know that's what they are. I know this is what's happening to you. She's like, because I'm a woman too. And we're around the same age. And she's like, but in my scope of work, I can't treat you. And I said, and I greatly appreciate you telling me that instead of trying to tell me, like, well, just, go do some more exercise and get some walking in and do some deep breathing and, all this stuff, And so I said, well, what do I do, Karen? I said, because, I can't keep living like this. Like I feel like a different person, like someone that has come into my body and just made me feel awful. And she said, I don't want to send you to an endocrinologist around here where I live. I live in Virginia. And she said, because the endocrinologists around where we're at are going to really be focused more on diabetes. She's like, so they're going to be talking about insulin and, a lot of these other things. And she's like, I just don't think they're going to be the right fit. She goes, if you can find a hormone specialist online, she's like, there's a lot of telehealth options out there now. A lot of them are out there. And she's like, I would just ask you to do that and just try. So I did. I went with a hormones specialist that was with MIDI Health. There's many other ones like MIDI Health. And I ended up working with a nurse practitioner that works under a GYN that is trained in hormones and went through all of my symptoms. And that's how they diagnosed me, Michelle. It wasn't by having any labs drawn or anything like that. They're like, tell me about all your symptoms. Tell me how it makes you feel. Tell me when you feel it. Is it all the time? Is it during certain parts of the month? Is it, in the mornings and the evenings? And I went through this complete, exercise of telling them what's going on in my life. And they said, we don't need to test anything. Every symptom that you have told us is alerting and telling us that your hormones are changing and they're shifting and they're fluctuating and they're doing the dance. And they gave me several options. I did not choose at that time to do any hormone therapy. I decided some other options were better for me, but they do have hormone therapy available. They do have non-hormone therapy options available. They also set me up to talk to a registered dietitian because my diet was crap. I was not eating well enough. And I had to talk to them about eating for nourishment, not just eating because I was, needed a snack or I was hungry or I should eat some chips or some, a cake or whatever it might be. They taught me like, you need to feed your body so that you can keep these hormones happy and healthy and give your body the best, availability to gather things and get those nutrients and, everything it needs. And then I had to talk to a therapist because a lot of the things with hormones, when they start shifting, they really bring up deep seated grief and also things that you thought that you buried back in your 20s and your 30s, maybe some trauma that you might have had. It all comes bubbling up. And a lot of things that were really impacting me were from 10, 20 years ago with a relationship issue that I had with my own mother. And when I went to therapy and really got it all out and laid it on the table, I was like, dang, that felt like 100 pounds came off my chest. So I really think when these hormones and everything start shifting, it shifts everything emotionally too. And I was taking that anger out on my husband. I really was. I mean, I was giving it to him day in, day out. He's the nicest man. Like, he is a good guy. Like, and you're talking about people carrying their weight. He probably carries more weight than I do in the relationship, just to be honest with you. But not every man is like that. And I was hurting him. And I was so happy that I got through that step and I was able to get that out. And then I started having joint pain, back pain, and hip pain. And having chronic pain makes you a butthole. And when you feel like crap, and plus you have hormones changing, I was a mean person to be around. I felt terrible. And so I started some chiropractic care because I wanted to just kind of figure out what I needed to move around. Holy cannoli, when we got that under control, I was a different person. Like I was pain relieved, feeling better, more mobile, and able to, I was getting to the point where I couldn't walk without my foot falling asleep. So I wasn't able to get exercise. And, so I was like, okay, is there something wrong? It took 2 years to do some of these things and to advocate for myself and to talk to people and say, like, I don't want to feel like this no more. Like, I don't want this. I want to live healthy. I want to feel better. And it took about 2 years to kind of turn that ship because I got into a very low point. And so what I want to advocate for your listeners, and especially if they are, in their 30s, maybe early 40s, listen to your body now. And I did listen to my body then, but I didn't know that I was getting to the point that I was going to crash and hit this hormonal wall. And then all of a sudden it was like it took a lot of effort to turn the ship around and get me back on the right track. So the thing is if you go to a doctor and you share your experience and they say you're too young, that's ridiculous. No, hormonal changes cannot be tied to an age at all because you could be in your 20s and have hormonal shifts. And so that's a lie. And if they're telling you that it's in your head or whatever, I want you to seek some telehealth options because there are some great options out there that are focused on hormone treatments and focused on your symptoms. So like I like to tell people, like you said, you could take labs, but it doesn't matter because the next day you might have high estrogen. The next day it could be low. And then, like it's a changing field, I kind of call it the messy middle is what's happening. It's really messy. And, when people say things to you like you're grouchy or you're angry or whatever, think about that. If they're brave enough to tell you that, think about that and start journaling some of these things. Like, in the mornings I'm exhausted, and by the evenings I can't function. This day of the month I feel like this. You start developing your own patterns, and when you take patterns to a doctor that is trained for patterns, they can't say no to that. And you have to say things like, this is impacting my life. This is impacting my relationships. This is impacting my job. Like, you have to say those things because when they hear that, they can start putting some of those symptoms together and start looking for a treatment. So journal that, find that out. Just like you said, where you're tracking, like where you are in your period and, how much capacity you have and things like that. It's huge. It's so huge. So gaining control for yourself, because nobody is coming to save you, sister, is what I always like to tell people. Like, nobody is going to do this for you. Nobody is going to be there to swoop in and save you. You have to be there for yourself. And it took me hitting a wall to say, this is enough. And so don't hit that wall like me.
I mean, that's it right there. Like, you need to stop dismissing your symptoms and downplaying it or saying, well, it's just every now. Like, truly, if you start to log your patterns, like the symptoms that you experience, that will help expedite the process so much because then they can take you seriously. I mean, I hate to say that, but they'll take you more seriously because it's like, oh, you notice that it happens every, however many weeks. That's interesting. Okay, so let's take a better look at this, right? There is so much more out there resource wise when it comes to perimenopause and menopause. There's a whole documentary about it now. And I'm so glad to be entering in this stage with more resources available to me because I'm just looking back on my mom's experience and I'm like, I do not want to be like that. Or even my mother-in-law, I remember her talking about heart palpitations and she had a lot of anxiety, right? And so I'm like, I definitely don't want that either.
Yeah.
And I'm 40 and you're telling me you hit the peak at 47. So that kind of terrifies me. And I'm like, oh gosh, it gets way worse than this. Okay. But knowing is half the battle, right? And now that I know if I encounter, I shouldn't say when I encounter these symptoms, I'll know what to do next. I won't just be like, well, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. Sorry, mommy is just like, not a nice person anymore, which is not the relationship I want with them, right?
Nope. And we're not taking it anymore. I mean, essentially, I think is what it comes down to is women's like, no, like this is not how it's going to be. We want to take care of our kids. We want to play with our kids. Right. We want our kids to have the best version of us. Because when you think back to your mother, and I think back to my mother and even my grandmother, When I think back to the ages they were probably in, they were both on antidepressants because they were told it was in their head, and they were numb. And they were not part of my children's lives. Because they were just women that were just stuck on antidepressants, and it wasn't treating what was really going on with them. Antidepressants have a place, but it's not first line treatment for perimenopause hormonal changes. It's not. And when I sit back and think about that, and I'm thinking, wow, they just didn't, they weren't vibrant. They just didn't really have a life. They were just numb all the time because they were mistreated with medication that wasn't for the root cause of their problem. It's sad.
Yeah, so don't let that be you. We don't want that for you. We don't want that for ourselves. So, start paying attention to what you're experiencing and take it seriously as if it was your child telling you something's wrong or your husband telling you something's wrong. Like, you would be on Google so fast or making appointments so fast. Like, do that for you too. You don't need to deal with it anymore because, I think as women, we do have a higher tolerance for pain just because, our cycle, like we've been dealing with it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Brooke, for coming onto the show. I know you have a course. Can you please share with us about that course?
Sure. So I've developed the Hormone Informed Midlife Marriage course because it's what I wished I would have had, even about 10 years ago, to really kind of just walk couples through this whole thing that we've been talking about. It goes, a lot more in depth than you and I have just had a conversation about, but what both couples are experiencing in midlife. So not only us as women are shifting hormonally, but the men are too. Their testosterone is declining. And although it's not a dramatic shift like we feel when we go through perimenopause, theirs is much more gradual. I call it a slower taper, but it does impact their mood. It does impact, how they feel in a relationship. So there's a lot of things that does impact their vitality as well. And it kind of walks through, what that lived experience looked like as a midlife couple and how you keep the connection strong, how you make sure you keep intimacy and part of that, and understanding, awareness, and education, and developing a shared language. I could just keep talking, so I'm going to leave it at that.
I love it. If you feel like that is what you're needing for your marriage, go check it out. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more from you? Because you make the best Instagram content. Because when I first saw it, I was like, yep, that sounds right.
Well, thank you. And I try to ground all of my content that I make for social media in science, but face it in plain language. Because you can read so much science and then you don't know what you're reading by the time you get to the end of it. So essentially, I want to take that science, I want to make it accessible and easy to understand for people. So that's my whole goal. But my Instagram handle is @marriage in perimenopause because that's where it all started for me.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing with us more about what we can come to expect and how it can impact our marriage and how to know the difference. If you have loved this episode and you want to connect with Brooke, please go check her out on Instagram. Go check out her course. If you know someone that would benefit from this episode, please send it to them. Better yet, share this episode in your Instagram stories. Tag us so we can give you a shout out. If you love the show, thank you for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you would please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I would so appreciate it. That's what helps the show grow so that more people like you can get the support that they need. And that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you can listen to this and take something away to help you advocate for yourself for a better experience through perimenopause and menopause, more so than previous generations. Yeah. And I'll catch you back here on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram @MichellePertaCoaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.